Hello, everybody. Welcome to Movies by McManus, the podcast where we talk about movies, comics, TV, whatever type of media you're into, in the context of who created it and what effect it's trying to have on the world. So this week we're going to be talking about The Westies, the 1990 book written by T.J. English. I'm your host, Greg. I'm with my brother, Mike.
What's up? How's it going?
And this was a topic that I really wanted to cover. If you've been following this podcast, you know that like organized crime has been something that's very much fascinated me. Being from an Irish family, a New York Irish family, these were a group of people that I was always very interested in. And T.J. English, this is actually his first book, written in 1990. And normally, you know, on this podcast, we try to do more recent things. So this is like one of the oldest books that we really would be reviewing. But just since it's the topic of the Westies, it was something I really wanted to talk about. And
yeah, I mean, T.J. English is he's remained active, so he's had a really nice career since then, and
yeah,
we're just kind of fans of him generally speaking.
Right.
But this particular history is something that's interesting. As Greg mentioned, we're Irish on our father's side,
yeah,
and we kind of have. I mean, there's no way to say it without sounding kind of egotistical or whatever, but we kind of come from I don't want to say famous, but like a known... A well-known...
right. Well, there's a well-known establishment, a bar in Manhattan.
We come from a family called McManus that has a long history in the city. And there's another family called McManus that has another more sort of political ties.
Who are mentioned in the book,
exactly.
Who we are not related to.
We're not related to, but we go back...
Yeah.
Probably even before them, or at least as long. But anyway...
Yeah, well, I believe that our family and them kind of arrived in America at the same time.
Right.
But we are not related. But T.J. English, he a lot of his books combine kind of organized crime with culture. It's organized crime as culture, and you see that in the Westies. You see that of just the west side of Manhattan as a whole was always a very Irish neighborhood, and then there was obviously the West Side docks there, a lot of shipping coming in, and because of that, there was a huge amount of Irish gangsters who kind of rose up during Prohibition. And
longshoremen
and the International Longshoremen Association for a long time was controlled by the Irish mob, and there is this combination between a culture and kind of a criminal element that's present in T.J. English writes about it a lot in his most recent book, The Corporation. He kind of makes these same themes, but he talks about the Cuban Mafia that kind of came into this country in the 60s, trying to get away from Fidel Castro. And the Cuban Mafia, while the Irish mob kind of had their hands in all different sorts of crimes, the Cuban mob was really more in this thing called Bolita, which I believe we've mentioned before on this podcast, probably a lot, where it's basically an illegal lottery.
Yep.
And there's a tie between an ethnic group and kind of using organized crime as a way to preserve their culture in a new country. And
you see this a lot with various ethnic groups that came to New York, specifically the ones that we come from, which are...
Well, the Irish, the Sicilians, right. Obviously. They had this long-standing tradition called, the Mafia, or La Cosa Nostra, and brought it to America as a way of, well, at least this is how it's justified, as a way of remaining Italian or remaining Sicilian. And it's interesting where you look at the difference between the Italian Mafia and your normal organized crime gang. Because while, you look at criminals in general, it's like it's a very, most of them never work with each other and they're just off committing crimes. And then you have gangs, which is more organized. And then above gangs, you really have the Italian Mafia, which is more organized than almost any gang in history.
Yeah, at least it used to be. And, I just want to point out, too, it's like they kind of always, I feel like that's always the justification that people use. And you pointed this out on your breakdown about, I think you mentioned like, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but Tony Soprano would always use that. It's like,
yes,
we're preserving our heritage. And it's like, in the beginning, specifically with Irish people and Sicilian people, how they came to New York, just sort of like as a way to sort of carve out an existence and almost a survival.
Yeah.
Particularly with our family on the Irish side, how they were bootleggers.
Yeah.
Before we opened up, and got into the bar business.
Before we started doing it legally. Yes.
Right, correct. Which is what that's what our family's line of work was. But before it was legal, they were doing it illegally. So there's a certain real truth to that.
Yeah.
As far as the survival. But then, people kind of, when you start getting into like this real power hungry stuff and real like treachery, it's like that just becomes, like anything else, an excuse.
Well, especially with like Tony Soprano, it's clearly just a justification for him, because he's not a poor Irish immigrant. He's not a poor Italian immigrant.
He's multiple generations removed.
And kind of the point of this book is Jimmy Kunin, the leader of the Westies, kind of wanted the Irish mob to be structured more like the Italians. And the reason the Italians were able to create that structure is because they did it in a time when they were very poor, when there was very few opportunities for Italians, when there were only certain neighborhoods they were really even allowed to live in, and if they had done this, if he had tried to organize like the Italians back in like the 1910s or the 1920s, when Irish very much were being discriminated against, maybe it would have worked. But he did it in the late 70s and the 80s when...
It was, far too late at that point. They were just brutal thugs.
And they were brutal thugs. But this idea of we're sticking together because we're Irish and we want to rise up the social ladder, it's like... Well, we've been in this country for almost 100 years now. Our family's been here.
It's horseshit.
So what are you even talking about?
Yeah, plus you care so much about your Irish brothers that you're setting them up to get,
he said Mickey Featherstone, which we'll get into. But I kind of want to break down just like, the history of just like the West Side of Manhattan and the Irish. So... the Irish mob, like kind of who's considered like the first boss, is this guy named Owen Madden, who was this major bootlegger who kind of like started this organization that's really passed on through the generations. And after Prohibition, a lot of the Irish gangsters leave because they realized like we had this massive moneymaker through Prohibition. We've kind of risen up the social ladder. Like now after Prohibition, there is a lot of very wealthy Irish people in New York. There is a lot of Irish people, because they were more wealthy, they were getting into politics. And it really is, after Prohibition, there's no need for an Irish mob. And you look at
if you're using it for those reasons.
If you're using it for those reasons.
The survival
but
reasons.
You look
not
at,
if you're power hungry.
You look at Owen Madden, or you look at like a lot of the early Prohibition gangsters. Once alcohol becomes legal again, they just take their money and they go. Or they open up a bar, they open up a restaurant.
Like what we did.
Like what we did. And they say, okay, we made our money. There's no need for this anymore. Then comes along an Irish gangster named Eddie McGrath, you're talking about the more power hungry. That's him. He kind of creates this empire through the West Side docks. He takes over the International Longshoremen Association, which is a union of dock workers that has always been heavily connected with the Irish mob. And then around the 1950s, he leaves New York for Florida, and he passes it off to this guy, Huey Mulligan. And Huey Mulligan, he has two kind of trainees or 2 proteges. One is Mickey Spillane, who is brought up in the book. Another one is James Burke, Jimmy Burke goes off to Queens and starts working for the Lucchese family.
By the way, anyone named Jimmy Burke, just immediately arrest them.
Right, because yesterday our video on Lost Girls came out. Since, obviously you're not going to know because, like, these come out weeks later after we shoot them. But anybody named... I want, like, 2 pieces of shit who we bring up often. Jimmy Burke, in Suffolk County, who kind of
just to give a little background. We talk about the movie Lost Girls we reviewed last week, which deals with the Long Island serial killer case, which is something that's very close to us, being from Long Island. But anyway, one of the key sort of figures, like a bad guy on the law enforcement side who ended up going to prison, was the former chief of police in Suffolk County on Long Island, where the murders happened, named James Burke. So Jimmy Burke.
The Jimmy Burke that I'm talking about.
Not the same. This is Jimmy Burke.
Also piece of shit.
Bob De Niro plays him in...
Robbie De Niro, who was...
in Goodfellas.
In Goodfellas...
Why did I call him Bob? I've literally never said that
Apparently
once.
In real life, he goes by Bob.
Maybe I heard that somewhere. Yeah. It just kind of came out.
He goes by Bob or Bobby. Yeah. Also, Jimmy Burke in real life, the Robert De Niro Jimmy Burke, way more of a psychopath than they show in
of course.
In the movie. I don't know
because Robert De Niro has such great acting range.
He does. He's good. One of like the scenes in when I read Wise Guys that really stuck out.
I love Robert De Niro. Don't get it twisted.
Yeah, Robert De Niro is great.
The last 30 years, not so much with the range. 20 years.
Fine. Yeah, 20 years I'll give you.
That's fair.
One of the things that really stuck out in Wise Guys was that Jimmy Burke had like murdered one of his best friends because he thought he was going to be an informant. Buried him under in his backyard and built a tennis court over the body. And Henry Hill would say we'd be playing tennis and he'd be like looking down and like having a whisper conversation like with his best friend that was buried underneath it.
That's not weird.
Yeah.
That's regular shit.
So you see kind of this organization that kind of started in Prohibition. It really like flourished with the dock bosses, Eddie McGrath, and the International Longshoremen Association. And there's kind of that connection where basically through the union, they're able to steal whatever they want.
Right.
That
doesn't happen anymore.
Well, yeah, and to this day, there are people getting arrested who claim to be Westies. Or I think the earliest was maybe like early 2000s.
I respect that.
And it's like clearly they're like not associated, but like since they're Irish and they work on the
real quick
West Side.
So our family, as we've mentioned a few times, we have a bar in New York, and 2 of the regular guys that used to be in there all the time
were Westies.
I shouldn't say their name.
You shouldn't say their name.
They were Westies.
They were Westies.
But they were old at this point. Like
yes.
I knew actually one of them has passed away, and the other one is. I was actually texting Justin, our cousin. Because I was asking if the other brother passed away too. Obviously, we haven't seen anybody since coronavirus.
Right.
But like, they were. I've actually like in drunken states been like, tell me about Mickey Featherstone, and they're like, they laugh but they won't talk about it, but they'll be like like, how do you know that type of thing?
Well, apparently here's another thing.
And they're from Hell's Kitchen. So.
Yeah. So anytime it comes talking about organized crime or a book on organized crime, it's always very hard to be accurate because most of this information is coming from informants who want to make themselves look better.
As far as sources, you mean?
As far as the sources go, who are trying to make themselves look better.
Yeah.
Other from it is from detectives investigating who want to make the gangsters seem as terrible as possible. Mm-hmm, so when you talk about Mickey Featherstone, at least in the book where a lot of this information is coming from Mickey Featherstone, he made it seem like he was one of the better Westies, where he was like, yeah, they would cut up bodies, but I always thought that was disgusting, so I would stay away from it. So when you're talking about like what these people were really like, it's always hard to say. It's always
listen,
hard to
if
be
you-
accurate when you're talking about crime because, you know, a lot of this is kept secret. So who knows what really happened?
And they're conniving people.
And they're conniving
the whole
people who
point
lie.
is they're liars.
Yes.
You know, if you're associating with people who cut up bodies, you know, I'm not really taking your word on too many
No,
things.
exactly. And there was kind of so let's get back to Mickey Spillane. So
Sure.
Mickey Spillane really is kind of like the last of the old bosses, where there was this
He's a business type.
he's a business type, but really like this tradition of like one boss passed it down on the to the other. Mickey Spillane is really last in line, and Mickey Spillane like kind of realizes that this is done. And the Italians are really moving into the neighborhood at this point.
Yeah, because he's feeling the pressure of the Italians.
He's feeling the pressure. The Jacob Javits Center is being built in Hell's Kitchen. It's a massive moneymaker, a lot of union jobs and contracts, and the Genovese family is trying to get in on that. And
the Italians are just so much better organized, like you said.
and they're so much better organized, and they're able to do it.
It's like fucking, you know, David and Goliath. Like the Westies were a freaking joke, like compared to.
They're all kind of jokes compared to it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, most like real like organized crime has disappeared long before the 70s. And by that time,
what do you mean? That's
when you're talking about like
not the Italians.
no, I'm talking about like besides the Italians,
Oh, okay.
real other ethnic organized crime groups has kind of disappeared. You know, you're talking about the Jewish mob,
Right.
which at one point before Prohibition was more powerful than the Italians.
Yeah, maybe in like the Southwest at that point, right? Like with Vegas and all that.
Well, no, because Vegas really doesn't come into play until like the 40s.
No, I'm saying before the like.
The like Jewish mob really kind of dissipates after
After the 40s?
after Prohibition.
Gotcha.
There's really no Jewish organization like how it was pre-Prohibition, where you have like gangsters like Arnold Rothstein, who Arnold Rothstein was really probably the most powerful gangster in America. You know, in like
More
the
than,
1910s.
I was going to say Urban Meyer, the fucking football coach. Meyer Lansky.
Well, Meyer Lansky kind of comes about later, but any Jewish mobsters that still are kind of power hungry and want a part of the gang, action really become more associated with just like the Italian mob.
Meyer Lansky was after Rothstein?
Yes. So Arnold Rothstein is like in the 1910s. Arnold Rothstein fixes the World Series.
The casino? Oh, the Black Sox stuff?
No. Yes. Arnold Rothstein and Rosenthal. Rosenthal is the casino guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
The R's.
Totally different
The R's
people.
trip me up. That's why I was saying like that timeline seems weird.
Totally different people.
My bad.
But so a lot of these older gangs kind of either disappeared, or whoever was left and still, you know, had a loan sharking or whatever business became part and associate of the Italians. And like you see with Jimmy Burke, he doesn't want to take on the Irish mob. You know, he probably could have been.
You mean he doesn't want to join them?
He doesn't want to join them, but since he was one of Huey Mulligan's proteges, he probably could have been the boss of the Irish mob.
Yeah, but then
he doesn't want that.
He would have been warring with the Italians.
He would have
and
been warring with
killed.
the Italians. He's given this kind of falling apart organization that, like, you know, aren't really doing much anymore.
He made the right decision because he had the power of a captain, if not higher.
He goes to Queens. He works for the Lucchese crime family. He commits the biggest robbery in America at that point.
Shout out to Vinny Asaro, straight out of Howard Beach.
I don't know.
He was also a captain.
Okay. And
I worked with
and Robert De Niro plays him in a movie, so he clearly makes the right. He clearly makes the right choice. At least, you know, you're talking about how, you know, a right choice in like a gangster's decision.
And again, that just goes to show what BS it is the whole like, I have to, bring my people up in the world. And it's like, oh,
exactly.
Okay, really? But you're just working with like the other,
Yeah. So Mickey Spillane kind of has, he has what's left of it. It really falls apart like during the 50s and 60s when the mob the Italian Mafia comes to their height of their power. The old boss, Eddie McGrath, he kind of realizes this. That's why he leaves New York for Florida. And the Jacob Javits Center starts being built in Hell's Kitchen. And this is when the Italians really are like, we've had enough of Mickey Spillane. We've tolerated the Irish mob for this long, but this is going to be a huge amount of money maker for us. So we want it, and we want you out. And during this time, Jimmy Kunin is also coming up. And Jimmy Kunin, he's a much younger gangster. He grew up poor in Hell's Kitchen. And back when he was a teenager, Mickey Spillane had kidnapped Jimmy Kunin's father and held him for ransom.
Did he grow up poor? Didn't they say he had like a normal background?
Or maybe, yes, I'm sorry. That's right. He didn't grow up poor.
He held on to a grudge.
Yes, he held on to
like George Bush.
But he was a psychopath.
It was like George W. Bush going after Saddam.
He held on to this grudge, and when he's a teenager, from a rooftop on Hell's Kitchen, when Mickey Spillane and his crew are down below, he fires on them with a machine gun. Nice. So Mickey Spillane puts a hit out on him. He sees two guys who he thinks are suspicious in a bar and thinks might be hitmen for Mickey Spillane. Him and a few of his friends attack the two people who weren't hitmen. They were just happened to be there. Drive them out to Queens and murder them.
Well, one of them survived.
One of them survived.
That's why he went to prison.
And Jimmy Kunin goes to prison. That's why he doesn't get life in prison.
Because he identified him.
Goes to prison. And then when Jimmy Kunin comes out, he's kind of spotted by this gangster named Roy DeMeo. And Roy DeMeo, we bring him up a lot on this podcast. He was a real psychopath. He was from Massapequa. And Roy DeMeo kind of sees Jimmy Kunin as his way in to take over the west side of Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, essentially, putting in a puppet regime.
A puppet regime, basically.
Yeah.
And he knew Jimmy Kunin had fired at Mickey Spillane with a machine gun. He knew that this was a guy who could take risks. And so Mickey Spillane, the boss, is now being attacked by this new generation of Irish gangster and Jimmy Kunin. And then the Italian mobs, with the Genovese family, who want the Jacob Javits Center. And the Genovese family kill Mickey Spillane's three highest lieutenants.
Yep.
And while all this is going on, Mickey Spillane kind of goes down to Florida and has a meeting with the old boss, Eddie McGrath, who's still alive, living down in Florida. And he's like, I need your help. I need your advice. The Italians want me out. These new gangsters want to take over Hell's Kitchen. What should I do? And Eddie McGrath is basically like, you should give up and you should move down to Florida. And if these young gangsters want to take over Hell's Kitchen, let them do it. Why not? There's no there's no need for an Irish mob anymore.
Essentially, it's a losing battle.
It's a losing battle, and the age of the gangster is over.
Well, and the problem is the Italian problem is they had set it up as essentially a career trajectory.
Yes.
Where it's if you were Italian and you grew up, it was literally it wasn't legit. That's the whole point. But it was a career path for kids in fucking Bensonhurst and in other shit where they're not seeing other opportunities. There were other opportunities, but if you had a handful of kids, it was basically a guarantee that half of them were going to go to organized crime.
Yeah. Well, there was, you look at the later gangsters of like the late 80s and early 90s who joined the Italian mob, it was just like, yeah, I went to college for 2 years and then I dropped out and decided to go into the mob.
Your neighbor is in it that you grew up with, who, you know, your next door neighbor who you played catch with, you know, is in it. Your dad's in it. Your all your uncles. I mean, it's like, you know, anybody would do that. That's why you kind of, you know, honestly feel bad for some of them, where it's like almost you know what I'm saying? Like they did bad shit, but like it's not like you went out of your way necessarily. It's like it was fucking everywhere.
Well, and that's exactly why in the late 70s, since the Irish didn't have that structure that you can pass on from generation to generation, the people who were joining the Irish mob as criminals just would have been nut jobs who would have been criminals anyway.
Exactly. It's like a fucking like walking into traffic on fire. Like there's no reason to do that. There's not even you're like, what are you going up against? You're either like going up against, you know, the Italians, or you're going to go to jail, or you're going to get killed, or like you're just dealing. That's why you have Jimmy Kunin, who's a fucking nut job. But
so Jimmy Kunin is, and that's the first kind of act of like when people realize like this guy is kind of crazy, is that Mickey Spillane was going to give him everything. He had moved out of Hell's Kitchen. He wasn't living there anymore. He was kind of liquidating all of his assets, getting his money out. And the plan was like, I'm going to let the Jimmy Kunin and his gang have Hell's Kitchen. I'm going to take whatever money I can, and I'm going to leave.
Essentially
retired. And Mickey Spillane was still liked in the Hell's Kitchen area.
Yeah, I mean, he was very much like a politician in the sense that he was, you know, he didn't do wrong by people.
And he was married to Maureen McManus, who the McManus family of Hell's Kitchen was very close to the like Democratic Club.
Yeah.
And they basically ran the Democratic Club in Hell's Kitchen, the McManuses, who we are not related to. So he was liked in the area. So you have like this well-liked guy who's not a threat to you, who is retiring, who's letting you have anything, and he thinks, I'm going to kill this guy anyway.
Okay, and how much of that was like because of what happened to his father?
True. But I have this grudge from when I was a teenager where you kidnapped my father and beat him up. Yeah, so I'm going to kill you anyway.
And if you're the type of person...
That's a good point. That is a good point.
That's why I made the joke about George W. Bush. Like, you know, that's the whole joke, right? Like,
right.
You know, of course, we went to Iraq for oil. Everybody knows that. But, like, there was that hanging in the distance where it was, like, supposedly Saddam Hussein tried to kill George Bush. I don't even know if that's... to me, that doesn't even sound like possible. Like,
I don't think... I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that there was the joke. Like, obviously, there was the Dave Chappelle joke when they have Dave Chappelle playing George Bush. And he's like, honestly, the guy tried to kill my father. And I don't know. I mean, if you're a psychopath and you just take that.
If someone tried to kill my dad, I'd probably
that's true.
Try to kill them.
That's true.
You know, which is like not what you should do, but it's probably what I would do. I don't want to be in that position. Obviously,
don't want to be in that.
I don't want to find myself in that position. Shout out to Brian McManus, keeping things on the up and up.
So I should bring up before we really get into the Westies story. The documentary, The Irish Mob, which gives a very brief summary of the story.
Yeah. This is not exactly your... I'm trying to think of the guy who did the Vietnam documentaries. It's enjoyable.
Ken Burns?
Yeah, it's not Ken Burns.
No, but it gives a very basic story. So if you just want to like know the outline of what happened, it's pretty much like each episode is about like a different Irish group.
Are you talking about the series?
The series as a whole.
Yeah.
So we had watched the episode. The first half is on Mickey Spillane, and the second half is on the Westies, which you really can't tell one story without the other. Like, you can't really explain who the Westies were and why they were like this without first talking about Mickey Spillane.
Right.
Another one, there's There's a movie that I haven't seen, but I feel like I should bring it up with Sean Penn and Gary Oldman. That's loosely based off the Westies.
Wait a second. Can we talk about the movie that you worked on?
In a bit.
Okay,
all
right.
In a bit. There's also a book called Doc Boss, which is about Eddie McGrath.
You've read that.
I've read it. It's really good. It's good as a precursor to the Westies book because
it's the history. Yeah.
The Eddie McGrath book ends exactly where this book starts. The Eddie
T.J. English as well? Or no?
No, it's not T.J. English. I forget who wrote it, but the Eddie McGrath book, Doc Boss, ends with Mickey Spillane becoming the boss of Hell's Kitchen.
Right.
Which is exactly where this book starts. So let's get into the Westies. Jimmy Kunin, he comes out of prison and he's immediately kind of recruited by this guy named Roy DeMeo. And Roy DeMeo is kind of up and coming. I'm not sure if he was like a made man yet. He might have still been an associate. Talking? This was probably 76, maybe.
Oh, he's definitely made by 76.
Yeah,
because he's dead in 82, and he was a captain when he died.
No, he was a soldier.
He was never a captain.
He was never a captain.
Shit, my bad. He definitely was captain adjacent.
He's captain adjacent, especially because he was.
Damn.
He was never a captain.
Okay.
But he was making more money than most of the captains.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
He was making it. Roy DeMeo was in Canarsie, Brooklyn. He basically owned the biggest auto theft ring.
How the fuck did they not make him a captain?
I'll tell you why.
He had his own crew.
I'll tell you why. Oh. Because Paul Castellano, who was the boss, did not like him.
That genius.
Did not like him. He was also Napolitan. His family was from Naples.
Right.
And at that time,
supposed to be
you're Sicilian. Not allowed to be a captain unless you're Sicilian. And Paul Castellano kind of uses this as an excuse to not make Roy DeMeo a captain, which was really a slap in the face because around that same time that Roy DeMeo becomes a made man, they make John Gotti a captain, who is not Sicilian. So Roy saw this as like a slap in the face, but also like he really didn't have like his interest was in making money. His interest wasn't really of rising up the hierarchy.
He respected the mafia code to a degree. I mean, to a large degree, but he also
not really.
No, but he believed in like the rules as far as like respect goes. Like I know that he did like porn and like I guess he did drugs.
He was a massive heroin distributor.
So not as far as that goes, but they all fucking rub, you know.
He also had a murder for hire scheme, which you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
And he was also planning on killing the boss, which you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
So he wasn't. But anyway, Roy DeMeo is trying to make a name for himself in the Gambino crime family. He knows that the West Side Irish mob has always kind of been difficult for the Italians. It was kind of this area that, you know, while they had controlled pretty much all the city and most of New Jersey, the Irish really just held on to the West Side docks of Manhattan, specifically in Hell's Kitchen, because when you talk about Eddie McGrath and the bootleggers, they controlled pretty much the entire West Side. From Greenwich Village up to Hell's Kitchen. By the time of Mickey Spillane, the Irish mob really were only in Hell's Kitchen. And the Westies never really got bigger than Hell's Kitchen. So they know that, one, the Italians have always had a problem with the Irish on the West Side. They were never able to go in. There's like a little bit of an alliance between the Irish mob and the Genovese family, where dating back to Prohibition, dating back to Owen Madden, who was good friends with Lucky Luciano, who kind of started the Genovese family. When Lucky Luciano was kind of creating the five families in general, he actually wanted Owen Madden to join, and basically the Irish mob would have been the sixth family. But the other bosses like told him like, no, we want to keep this 100% Italian. So there was kind of a long-standing connection between the Irish mob and the Genovese family. And that's,
so how did that work when the Gambinos started working with the Westies? Okay, here's the thing: the Westies and the Irish mob that was working with the Genovese family were not the same. They
were not the same.
Exactly. That was the Spillane and before.
They were not the same.
Exactly.
But
that's why the Westies never had a relationship like that. That relationship, in other words, didn't cross over.
No, but when the Westies come up with this plan to take out Mickey Spillane, this is what they did. They said, we're going to be the organized crime presence in Hell's Kitchen. We're an alliance with the Gambino, but you guys can have the Jacob Javits Center. And that was enough to just keep the Genovese family happy.
Oh,
because that's what
did the Gambinos get like okay that
the Gambinos were fine. I'm assuming because nothing ever happened with it afterwards. But that was their agreement with the Genovese family, was that, you know, we're the new Irish mob in Hell's Kitchen. We're not with you. We're with the Gambinos. But the Jacob Javits Center, which is what you really wanted from the beginning, is yours.
The Westies were the independent record label who had distribution through the Gambino crime family.
Sure. Around this time, kind of Mickey Featherstone joins the gang. Mickey Featherstone he's also a violent psychopath, but like in the way that it's like this guy should have been in a hospital.
Dude, you ever see pictures of him?
He looks like a crazy person. He apparently
I was going to say, there's one photo of him. He straight up looks like dad.
Oh,
like you ever see the photo where no, it's not like he looks good. Like he's got, but like dad and
I remember when dad used to have long hair.
He had hair like this, and he's the same beard, and like his head is just down like that. And like they were probably the same age. Like they were probably like in their 20s, like in the late 70s or something. And it's just funny.
Mickey Featherstone is a Vietnam vet who, I guess he was discharged for like mental health reasons. He spent a bunch of time in mental institutions, and
what a nightmare.
And Jimmy Kunin basically he basically took advantage of this guy, where there's this guy who wasn't really mentally fit, and Jimmy Kunin kind of like trains him to be his basically enforcer.
It's like a people pro thing.
Yeah, like people know that he's a crazy person in the area. A lot of people are scared of him because they've heard stories of Mickey Featherstone,
and he just molded that into.
And he molded that.
What he wanted to do.
You see, like, through a lot of their relationship,
chaos. I said COINTELPRO. I meant chaos. Like taking someone who's like just mentally fucked from war or something, or like. You know,
and turning them into like a violent assassin for you. But through a lot of Jimmy Kunin and Mickey Featherstone's relationship, it's Jimmy Kunin kind of taking advantage of Mickey Featherstone. He knows that this is a guy who's not really mentally well, who can be like easily convinced of doing things.
Right.
And then one of the first like big things that Jimmy Kunin does is they take out this guy named Ruby Stein. Mm-hmm. And Ruby Stein is a gangster. He's connected to the Genovese family, and Ruby Stein was basically the biggest loan shark in Manhattan at that time. And the Westies and a lot of the Irish criminals on the West Side had kind of built up a large amount of debt with Ruby Stein. And they decide that they are going to kill Ruby Stein. And they do it along with this guy named Danny Grillo, who's a hitman for Roy DeMeo. Mm-hmm. And they all take Ruby Stein into the bar. It's Jimmy Kunin Danny Grillo and 2 others, and they all take one gun and put one bullet into Ruby Stein themselves. So it's like we're all in this together.
Well, it's not as much inspirational as it is like, we're murdering someone. Yeah,
you're
connected to this crime now.
But
you're implicit.
But the Westies basically not only is like now their debt to this guy gone, they go around to everyone they collected money from, and was like, you owe this to us now.
Damn, that's savage.
Yeah.
So they wiped out their own debts and then got
They
money.
wiped out their own debts, and then they found basically his black book.
Right.
That he wrote down how much everybody owed him. And they went around and said, you owe this to us now. And by that, the Westies and Jimmy Kunin basically became the biggest loan sharks in Manhattan. And they were now working for the Gambinos. Somehow, like, Paul Castellano kind of swooped it out.
That hit on Ruby Stein was also involving Italians.
Was also Italian.
So did they get a
Danny
piece
Grillo.
Of it?
Yes.
The Westies didn't get the whole book. I
believe that the Westies got the whole book, but the Westies were giving like 10%
points
back to the Gambinos.
Right. There's always something.
There's always something. And accounts differ of who was really behind the Ruby Stein murder. In the Westies, it makes it seem like it was Jimmy Kunin's idea. Mm-hmm. In the book Murder Machine, it makes it seem like it was Roy DeMeo's idea.
And again, this is the problem you outlined with sources. And
of like, this is a loan shark who's connected to our rival family. Let's get this new gang that's connected to our family to take him out.
Right.
And now, since they're the biggest loan sharks, now the biggest loan sharks work for us rather than a rival family.
Yeah.
And then so he's getting kind of reputation, Jimmy Kunin, like among the neighborhood and among gangsters of kind of like this crazy person who would whack out anyone. And then he goes to prison for well, he's tried for murder of this guy named Harold Whitehead, was drunk at one of Jimmy Kunin's bars, and he makes some insult about Jimmy Kunin's mother. He like tells him like he's like, fuck your mother or something just stupid. And Jimmy Kunin like tells his guys to bring him in the bathroom, and they bring him in the bathroom, and Jimmy Kunin shoots him in the head.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think was gonna happen? You can't tell a mafia guy to go fuck their mother.
Yeah,
like that's
well, a lot of them were. First of all, the people in the gang who were bringing them, at least from Mickey Featherstone's testimony, he was like, we thought we were bringing him into the bathroom to beat him up. We didn't know he was just going to shoot him in the head in a bar, in the bathroom of a bar that we own. Like, that seemed like the dumbest thing ever.
Well, Kunin's not I barely respect this guy at all. No. Not that you should respect mafia people, but I'm just saying he's not even like, he's just such a dork. Like, he's not a dork. He's just such an idiot. Like, he's like, he doesn't do any.
He's an idiot.
He's just an idiot on fire. Like,
and he's kind of obsessed with structuring the Westies. He's never really successful in it, but he wants to structure the Westies the way that the Italians have.
But how big were they at their height even?
It's hard to say because it's not like in the Italian Mafia where
there's
it's
actual
like
ranks.
There's ranks and there's made men. There's a ceremony of when you're introduced. So there's
a potato in your hand.
So there's like a ceremony, and there's basically like a clear distinction of who's in the gang and who isn't. The Westies didn't have that. There's no line saying you're a Westie or you're not.
Right.
It's either you hung out with them a bunch and you're a Westie, or you hung out every once in a while, so you're kind of a Westie, And Kunin, I think there were like 20 or 30 guys.
See, Kunin would have been like laughed out of Shark Tank. They would have been like, here's why I'm passing.
But he had this idea of basically trying to structure it with like their captains and their soldiers and their associates, and like a clear way of like if he was killed or went to life in prison, that there'd be a way to basically transfer it from one generation to the next, like the Italians did. And he also started like wearing suits and kind of dressing like the Italians. And Mickey Featherstone was like, one day I walked into the bar and Jimmy Kunin was wearing a suit, and he was like, we don't wear suits. Like, what are you doing? Because they were very much, I said it in my breakdown, it was like they didn't want to follow the rules. The reason they were criminals is because they didn't want to follow the rules. And now you're putting rules on people who, they don't care about transferring this on to the next generation.
That's some young boy shit.
Yeah,
man. You got to realize that discipline equals freedom.
I don't know what that means.
It means like when you have that sounded like real authoritative. That sounded real suspect.
I don't know what you're trying to say with that.
No, like when like, hey man, no rules. That's why we're in the Irish mob. It's like, no, like when you are disciplined and you have structure, fucking goals can be met.
But they didn't care about the goals.
I know,
they wanted enough.
Trying to smoke weed and chop people up, bro.
They wanted, if they made enough money to pay their rent and their and their bar tabs and whatever coke they wanted to buy that week, that was fine.
Small-minded shit, man.
That was it. That's why
I don't fuck with that energy.
They're not like the Italian gangsters where they're building something or they're part of something. They were just criminals who happened to be all working together.
Right.
And Jimmy Kunin is trying to form them into something that's like, we don't care about this.
You think they come up with like excuses like anyone does trying to get out of work? Like, hey man, sorry, I can't chop the guy up today. Not really feeling good.
I had to take my mom to the hospital. I have to take my mom to the doctor so I can't chop up a body with
loan shark client.
I can't. You know that murder? You came up with that really cool thing where we'd all put one bullet into the guy each. Yeah, it's gonna have to be 4 instead of 5 because I gotta take my mom to the doctor.
How many times do you have to take your mom to the doctor?
I don't know. I have a lot of moms. My parents.
I'm sure that has actually happened though. When you think about it, because people are just people at the end of the day. Like, this fucking Jimmy Kunin, man. We just chopped this fucking guy up last week, man. Leave me alone. I'm trying to fucking.
And he came up with the idea of chopping up bodies from Roy DeMeo, because Roy DeMeo had that, like, he had this like system in place of how he got rid of bodies, where basically is like he chopped them up and then you puncture their lungs and then you put them in the water, and since the lungs are punctured, like air fills up in the lungs and they sink down.
Everybody knows that, Greg.
Jeez. Everybody knows that.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. These guys are idiots.
They are. So the Harold Whitehead murder is kind of it sends Jimmy Kunin to prison, not for the murder but for a gun charge. He's charged with the murder.
Yes.
He's found innocent, but he's found guilty on a gun charge. And around the same time, Mickey Featherstone goes to prison, not for the murder, but for he was caught with counterfeit checks or counterfeit bills. So they're in prison at the same time. And we talk about the movie that I worked on, The Kitchen, starring Melissa McCarthy. Not a good movie. It's a bad movie. I don't know if you saw it.
No. How come we never watched that?
It is terrible.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
It's supposed to be a comedy?
It's not supposed to be a comedy. But it's all comedic people.
Oh, jeez.
How
was that experience?
While Jimmy Kunin was in prison, his wife Edna runs the gang. And Mickey Featherstone's wife Sissy helps her, and that's kind of where Mickey Featherstone and Jimmy Kunin start to part ways, because apparently Edna like treated Sissy like complete shit while she was her like supposed to be second, and like basically like dismissed her and didn't want anything to do with her. And Sissy kind of is like, hey, like these people are taking advantage of you.
Yeah. Hold on, real quick. What was your experience like working on that movie?
I don't know how much I could still say.
Even if it's out?
Even if it's out, I could say that, I don't know, we shot it out here on Long Island. There, I don't know.
I thought once it's out, but that's fine.
I can't really say anything like, I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say.
Okay,
even
moving on.
Even with it's out. I mean,
fine.
Story details I'm obviously allowed to say, but as of what the filming is like, I'm not sure. I'd rather just not mention
fine.
it because I'm not sure what
I just
the
think
rules
that's interesting for people to hear, but I get it.
Well, I can say, 1, the movie's not that good. 2, it doesn't really tell the correct story. I mean, it's loosely based off of them, so it's not really the Westies. But you have Melissa McCarthy playing an Edna Kunin type character. You have the other girl from Handmaid's Tale, who I forget her name, playing basically like a sissy Featherstone character. And then you have Donald Gleason, or Domhnall Gleeson, this Irish actor who's playing kind of like this psychopath killer, supposedly like Mickey Featherstone.
Right.
And it does kind of follow like the basic beats of the Westies story, where their husbands go to prison, so they take over the gang. They make an alliance with the Italian mob, kind of this, in the movie, it's like I guess it's supposed to be like a Roy DeMeo stand-in, but he's not really like a Roy DeMeo type. He's more like your basic, like, Godfather, like, cartoon
I hate when they do that shit.
Yeah.
It's just like...
It's basically like your guy, like, the exact same mafia boss that's in every movie. And
how are they still
so much,
doing that?
There's so much better that you could have. It's such a more interesting story that you could have, even if you just want to focus on when Jimmy and Mickey are in prison and their wives are are in prison.
Yeah,
even if you just want to focus, and their wives are controlling the gang. Even if you just want to focus on that couple of years, there's still a very interesting story there, and it really falls apart. Just like it's lame acting.
Yeah,
it's a story that's not really motivated. It tries to go through this women empowerment angle, but the characters are just all so unlikable and just like the biggest dirtbags ever. Where like I
love that like a bunch of writers like or Hollywood producers have to be like, how do we get in like the message? And it's just like it's about fucking horrible people.
Yeah.
Like what message? Yeah. What empowerment?
There is like kind of like a female empowerment, but it's just like you're talking about the worst fucking people
That's
ever.
What I'm saying. Like, but that's just Hollywood.
Yeah. So Mickey Featherstone gets out of prison. He's kind of more and more realizing, like, look, Jimmy Kunin, like, this is not a good idea. Like, we're not going to be like the Italians. Most of us don't want to be like the Italians. And he's been, like, Mickey Featherstone is realizing, like, I've never really wanted to be a gangster. I just, like, kind of haven't been able to make my own decisions. And like Jimmy Kunin realized this and realized like his entire life Mickey has kind of been being taken advantage of. So he tries to distance himself from the gang. He had like kind of a no-show job with the Teamsters,
right?
Which obviously the Teamsters and the Mafia go back. There's huge history there.
Yeah.
So he started like actually showing up for work more and more and like, basically trying to transition from gangster to, regular life. And during this time, Kunin kind of like sees Mickey as a threat, where it's like basically if Mickey's allowed to like leave and become a regular person, like, what does that say about me as boss?
Right.
So he wants Mickey out of the picture, but Mickey is well liked amongst the gang. He's more liked than Kunin is. So he comes up with this idea, I can't just flat out murder him.
Right.
I'm going to frame him for murder and send him to prison. And
give him the old Feach Lamana treatment.
Yeah. Exactly, from The Sopranos, Feach Lamana, who they frame for stealing some stuff and send him to prison. Yeah. In The Sopranos, which if you watch The Sopranos, if you take away one thing from the entirety of
Sopranos needs more promotion, yes, Greg. Make sure you get that in.
If you get one thing from all the episodes we've done on Movie McManus, one takeaway is watch The Sopranos.
I don't disagree.
So, they set him up, and Mickey Featherstone kind of realizes pretty quickly that that Kunin had set him up. Apparently, the guy who actually did the shooting wore like a long hair, like a wig and a beard to look like Mickey Featherstone.
Oh, and, shit! Really?
Yeah. And he was like, I knew something was up because the witnesses were allowed to testify. The fact that the witnesses showed up, the fact that Jimmy Kunin wasn't doing anything to stop like these eyewitnesses from testifying, because on Jimmy Kunin's earlier case of...
They'd just be intimidating the shit out of them.
Jimmy Kunin's earlier case against Harold Whitehead, the reason he doesn't go to prison, the reason he's acquitted, is because one of the witnesses ends up dead, and the other witness decides like, oh, I didn't see anything.
Right.
And he was like, the fact that nothing was being done to try to stop these people from testifying against me, like he was trying to work a normal job, but like he was still pretty close with Jimmy Kunin. Mm-hmm. And he was like, he figured out like, yeah, they've set me up. So he immediately becomes a government informant.
Right.
He starts having former Westies like meet him in prison, mm-hmm. That are like secretly taped, and he gets a lot of confessions from them. And he testifies against Jimmy Kunin. Jimmy Kunin gets 75 years in 1988, and he's still there today. And Mickey and Sissy Featherstone went off to the witness protection program.
Oh, wow. So Featherstone, he did time before that. Did he do any time from that moment on, or once he became an informant?
I think he went straight into the So I don't think he served any like real time after that. I think he went right into the program, and he's still alive.
Yeah,
he's still somewhere
in New Mexico.
He's lurking in the corners.
Oh shit!
He's looking in the fucking corners.
Dad,
on there. And then after that, we'll get into like the 90s. This isn't part of the book. This is just history. The Westies, what's left of them is taken over by this lower gangster. He's not Irish. He's Yugoslavian. They call him the Yugo. And he was a straight up terrorist. He was in prison from like the early 70s to the early 80s because he was hated. He was hardcore anti-communist. He hated the Yugoslavian government. Right. And when the consulate, when whoever from Yugoslavia tried to speak at the UN, he tried to blow them up, and then he tried to plant a bomb at the Yugoslavians' consulate.
What's this
house?
So far, I'm hearing just nothing but Yugoslavian shit. What does he have to do with the Westies?
So after prison, he goes. This is like 1982 when Jimmy Kunin is still around.
Because he was 88. Yeah.
Yeah.
Featherstone's in jail at this point, or he's.
Yeah, I guess Featherstone is in prison.
Because so Featherstone must have did some time before he testified. Because why is Kunin's trial so late? I guess they didn't have
No. Because he's in prison for something else. And then he goes to prison, I think, in like 86 for the murder.
Featherstone.
Yeah, Featherstone.
Gotcha.
And then in 88, Jimmy Kunin goes to prison.
Gotcha.
This is like 82 when Yugo is what he called, this Yugoslavian guy, comes out of prison and he's living in Hell's Kitchen. And Jimmy Kunin sees that this guy's a psychopath, a straight up terrorist, and kind of introduces him into the gang. And after 88, when there's the big trial and all like the older members of the Westies and only the go to prison and only the smaller or like the lesser members are left, this guy, the Yugo, takes over the gang and becomes the boss of the Westies. And the Westies basically, if Jimmy Kunin wasn't like already trying to be as much part of the Gambino family as possible, now the Westies are just like straight up a crew for John Gotti.
Right.
Where like this idea of like they're even the Irish mob anymore is gone. Where it's just like
so Kunin and the Yugo, shout out to Hugo Lopez. They were like working together.
Yeah, he was a Westie. He was a lower member in the gang.
So he was like second in command or some shit, and then when Kunin went in, he just took it over.
No. All the upper echelon of the Westies went to prison. Only the lower level soldiers are left.
Yeah, but you're saying from 82 to 88 though.
No. Kunin is still running the gang during that time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, he doesn't go to...
What is the Hugo?
He starts running it after Jimmy Kunin gets life in prison in 88.
Yes. So like in the 80s, he's just doing his own. He's just one of the lower level Westies.
All right, I got you. Yeah, he was never really like a part of
but
the
after
decision.
Kunin goes to jail, he's like working with John Gotti. This Yugoslavian guy.
Yes.
Damn.
He becomes the boss of the Westies because no one's left.
Right.
And then he becomes very close with John Gotti. And
what's this guy's name?
I can't pronounce it.
Okay.
But he goes by the Yugo. That's what they call him. And then when John Gotti goes to prison, the Yugo also gets convicted. Sammy Gravano testifies against him.
A fucking rat bastard.
The Yugo leaves America, goes back to Europe. He ditches charges.
Why did we let him go?
I don't know why you let him go. I was trying to figure out. He was able to like escape conviction.
Giuliani slipping.
He was able to escape conviction. He escapes to Eastern Europe, and then he gets on a plane in 1999
and
to try
9/11. He gets on hijacking an American Airlines flight.
He gets on a plane in 1999 to try to go to Brazil. They realize that this terrorist is on board who's wanted in America, and they just reroute the plane to America. He gets arrested and thrown in prison.
How did they figure that out?
I guess like he's an idiot and he used his like actual name, and during the checklist,
were just checking it.
Yeah.
Damn. So then, wow, that always, man.
So
do you
like
explain that to the other people on that flight?
No. By the way, we had a fucking terrorist on here.
So a couple quick things. We're actually going to New York, and there's a terrorist on board. Alrighty.
So you just have like a bunch of idiots.
Where was the plane
Hell's
supposed
Kitchen.
to be going? To Brazil?
I'm pretty sure Brazil.
That's a detour.
Yeah.
How do you explain that to the fucking well-paying clients of Brazilian Airways or whatever the fuck it's called?
They said, "Hey, there's a terrorist."
I'd be pissed. Imagine you were going on.
They didn't go to New York. They went to Miami. I should say that.
Yeah.
But
quick stop. Going to Pitbull's house.
So
there's a terrorist on board.
That's kind of. He's like the last boss of like the Westies. I wouldn't say he's even a boss of the Irish mob because he's not. It's not the Irish mob by that point.
No.
And then, since then, there's been gangsters on the West Side who refer to themselves as Westies.
Okay, so who's explain that? Like, who's calling themselves a Westie post Mr. Hugo?
I don't. I know that there was like some arrests and like it's some people.
We're talking when like
early
2000s.
2000s.
Really?
Yeah.
Like some, and they were Irish.
Some Irish guys, I'm guessing, working for the Gambino family, stealing things from the West Side Docks who referred to themselves as Westies.
Okay, so when did the Westies officially sort of die out? I mean, I understand it probably died out,
92 with the Yugo leaving America is probably like the dissipation of it.
And then
which would be 2 years after this book came out.
And then there was just some stragglers.
And then just some people, like some Irish Gambino associates stealing things on the West Side who were referring to themselves as Westies.
Yeah, exactly.
But, any hint of like the Irish mob is done. Yeah.
We should bring it back.
We should bring it back. I want to bring it back.
All right.
Did we do it? Are we good?
Yeah, we're more than good. We went over, but
all right.
I wasn't going to stop you because we're
the Westies,
some heat.
The Irish mob.
Talking about Yugoslavians on planes and shit.
It's a good thing to like bring up at the end of just like, hey, there was still like a little bit of a remnant after like the main people went to prison, who was run by this Yugoslavian guy. The Westies, TJ English, all of his books are great. He's fire. The Corporation, they're making a movie about it. That's his most recent book. I also love Havana Nocturne is amazing. And we already did one of TJ English's books. We did Where the Bodies Were Buried, which is great.
Yeah, that was early on. That was one of, was that? Actually, no, that didn't even.
Those are one after Lost Girls. We have not dropped that one
that's
yet.
Coming soon.
But by the time anyone's listening to this, we will.
It will have been out already. Okay.
Yeah. All right. This has been Movies by McManus. If you like this podcast, check out our YouTube channel where you can kind of have the video format of this exact podcast. And I will also be doing shorter breakdowns of whatever topic we're talking about that week. Also, follow us on social media at Movies by McManus. I'm your host, Greg. My brother, Mike.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us, and have a good night.
See ya.